She opened the file at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. Routine audit. Third quarter expense reports. Nothing unusual flagged in the preliminary review. She pulled the first expense sheet from the folder. Construction materials, industrial supplies, steel components, standard procurement for a manufacturing operation. Everything looked ordinary. Then she saw the vendor code, not the code itself, the pattern. 3 invoices. Same vendor, same payment amounts, different dates. But the purchase order numbers were sequential in a way that shouldn't have been possible given the dates they were supposedly issued. Catherine Wells set the sheet down, looked at it from a distance, picked it up again. She'd been doing this work for 11 years. Corporate auditing, financial compliance. She knew the difference between an administrative error and something designed to look like an administrative error. This was the second kind. She didn't know it yet, couldn't have. But that pattern in the purchase order sequence would eventually lead federal investigators to a manufacturing facility in Ohio to forged export documentation, to a network that had been operating for 3 years inside a company that built components for civilian infrastructure, and to something much larger than expense reports. She reached for her calculator, started from the beginning. Before we dive deep into this incredible story, subscribe to the channel. Tell me what city you're watching from. This is a fictional narrative inspired by historical Cold War espionage patterns. Characters and events are dramatized for educational purposes. Now grab your coffee or your favorite beverage, settle into a comfortable spot, and pay attention. Another story of the invisible war begins now. Let's go. I am Viktor Hale. Come to my world. This story is inspired by documented Cold War counterintelligence cases. Characters, companies, and specific events have been fictionalized. The method at its center, embedding intelligence operations within legitimate corporate structures, reflects practices confirmed through declassified investigations from this period. The company was called Meridian Industrial Technologies, mid-sized manufacturer, based outside Cleveland. They produced precision-machined components, parts for infrastructure projects, bridge construction, power grid systems, water treatment facilities, the kind of industrial work that was steady, unglamorous, and essential. Catherine Wells worked in the corporate accounting department, senior auditor. She'd been with Meridian for 6 years. Before that, 5 years at a Big 8 accounting firm in Chicago. She'd left for better hours and less travel, found both. She was 38 years old, divorced, no children. She lived in a townhouse 20 minutes from the Meridian campus. Her life had a pleasant predictability to it. Work, book club on Tuesday evenings, yoga on Saturdays, dinner with her sister's family once a month. She was good at her job, precise, patient, the kind of auditor who caught things other people missed. Not through suspicion. Catherine wasn't suspicious by nature. Through attention. She looked at numbers the way some people looked at art. She saw patterns, relationships, things that fit and things that didn't, which is exactly why the purchase order sequence stopped her. It was late September 1983, Thursday afternoon. The office was quiet. Most of the accounting staff left by 5 on Thursdays. Catherine usually stayed until 6. She liked the quiet, liked working without interruption. She'd been assigned the third quarter audit 3 days prior. Standard internal review. Every quarter, someone from accounting audited a sample of departmental expenses, looking for policy violations, documentation gaps, unusual spending patterns. Nothing dramatic, just routine compliance work. Catherine had pulled the procurement department's files. Thick folders, invoices, receiving reports, payment confirmations. She'd been working through them methodically since Tuesday. Most of it was exactly what she expected. Standard vendor relationships, recurring purchases, predictable patterns. Until the file she opened at 4:47 p.m., 3 invoices from a vendor called Allied Industrial Supply. Dates: June 14th, July 22nd, August 9th. Amounts: $18,450 each. Payment method: corporate check. All approved. All processed, all paid, nothing obviously wrong. But the purchase order numbers were sequential. Catherine looked at the dates again. June 14th, July 22nd, August 9th. Then she pulled the master purchase order log from her reference stack. The log that tracked every PO issued by procurement. Chronological, complete. Between June 14th and July 22nd, Meridian had issued 47 purchase orders. Between July 22nd and August 9th, 32 more, which meant PO 6847, 6,848, and 6,849 couldn't possibly have been issued on those dates. Not sequentially. Not unless someone had gone back and inserted them into the sequence after the fact. Catherine sat back in her chair. She thought about administrative explanations, data entry errors, late registrations, POs issued verbally and logged retroactively. All possible, all violations of company policy, but possible. She checked the approval signatures. Each invoice had been signed by Raymond Holder, procurement manager, 15 years with the company. Solid reputation. She checked the amounts again. $18,450 each one. Exactly. Round numbers happened. But the same round number 3 times from the same vendor felt deliberate. Catherine made a note on her legal pad, flagged the invoices with a yellow marker, set them aside. She continued through the rest of the file. Found nothing else unusual. At 6:15 p.m. she locked her office, drove home, made dinner, read for an hour before bed. But the purchase order sequence stayed with her. Most of it was exactly what she expected. Standard vendor relationships, recurring purchases, predictable patterns. Until the file she opened at 4:47 p.m. 3 invoices from a vendor called Allied Industrial Supply. Dates June 14th, July 22nd, August 9th. Amounts $18,450 each. Payment method, corporate check. All approved, all processed, all paid. Nothing obviously wrong. But the purchase order numbers were sequential. PO 6847, POL 6848, PO 6849. Catherine looked at the dates again. June 14th, July 22nd, August 9th. Then she pulled the master purchase order log from her reference stack, the log that tracked every PO issued by procurement. Chronological, complete. Between June 14th and July 22nd, Meridian had issued 47 purchase orders. Between July 22nd and August 9th, 32 more, which meant PO 6847, 6,848, and 6,849 couldn't possibly have been issued on those dates. Not sequentially, not unless someone had gone back and inserted them into the sequence after the fact. Catherine sat back in her chair. She thought about administrative explanations, data entry errors, late registrations, POs issued verbally and logged retroactively. All possible. All violations of company policy, but possible. She checked the approval signatures. Each invoice had been signed by Raymond Holder, procurement manager, 15 years with the company, solid reputation. She checked the amounts again, $18,450 each one. Exactly. Round numbers happened, but the same round number 3 times from the same vendor felt deliberate. Catherine made a note on her legal pad, flagged the invoices with a yellow marker, set them aside. She continued through the rest of the file, found nothing else unusual. At 6:15 p.m. she locked her office, drove home, made dinner, read for an hour before bed, but the purchase order sequence stayed with her. The next morning, Catherine pulled the vendor file for Allied Industrial Supply. Every company Meridian did business with had a vendor file. Basic information, registration documents, tax ID, contact details, payment history. Allied's file was thin. A single folder. Inside, a W-9 form, a business registration certificate from the state of Pennsylvania, a vendor application dated March 1983, and a reference letter from a material supplier in Pittsburgh. The tax ID on the W-9 was properly formatted. 9 digits, no obvious errors. The business registration certificate had the right seals, the right signatures, the right layout. But something about the folder bothered Catherine. Not its contents, its thinness. Meridian had been doing business with Allied since March, 6 months. But the vendor file contained only the initial registration documents. No correspondence, No contract amendments, no delivery schedules, no quality issues, no nothing. Most vendor files accumulated material over time, letters, memos, adjustments, the administrative debris of an ongoing business relationship. This one was pristine, like it had been created all at once and never touched again. Catherine photocopied everything in the folder, brought the copies back to her desk, locked the originals in the filing cabinet. Then she checked the payment history. Allied Industrial Supply had been paid 9 times since March, 3 times per quarter. Always the same amount, $18,450. Always approved by Raymond Holder, always processed without delay, $166,050 total. Catherine pulled the receiving reports. The documents signed by warehouse staff confirming that ordered materials had actually arrived. All present, all signed, all dated appropriately. But when she looked at the signatures, she noticed something. 3 different names across the 9 deliveries. Different warehouse staff. That was normal. The warehouse operated on shifts. Different people signed different reports. But the handwriting looked similar, not identical, but similar in a way that made her pause. She wasn't a handwriting expert. She couldn't be certain, but something felt off. She made more notes. The legal pad was now 2 pages. She needed to talk to someone, but she wasn't sure who yet. This could still be nothing. Administrative sloppiness. Holder cutting corners on documentation. Warehouse staff being casual about procedures. Going to her supervisor with incomplete information would reflect badly on her. Catherine had been raised to be careful, to be thorough, to make certain before speaking. She decided to dig deeper first. That evening she stayed late, pulled the files for every vendor Allied Industrial Supply had supposedly provided reference for. The Pittsburgh materials supplier mentioned in Allied's registration paperwork. The company existed. She found their phone number in a business directory. But when she called from her office phone after everyone else had gone home, the number rang 6 times and went to an answering service. She left a message. Professional. Said she was conducting a routine vendor verification for Meridian Industrial Technologies and would appreciate a callback. No one called back. She tried twice more over the next 3 days. Same result. Answering service. No return call. On Monday evening, she drove to the address listed on Allied Industrial Supply's vendor registration. It was in a light industrial area 40 minutes south of Cleveland. Older buildings, warehouses, small manufacturing operations. The address was real, a single-story building, grey brick, small parking lot. A sign by the entrance. Industrial Park Units 4, 7. Catherine parked, sat in her car, watched. No activity, no trucks, no workers, no lights in the windows. She got out, walked to the entrance, tried the door, locked. She looked through the window, could see an empty lobby, a few pieces of furniture, nothing else. She wrote down the building owner's name from a small placard near the door. Got back in her car, drove home. And would you have kept going at that point? Most people wouldn't. Most people would have reported what they'd found. The sequential purchase orders, the thin vendor file, and let someone else handle it. But Catherine wasn't most people. She kept going. Tuesday morning, Catherine called the building owner's office, said she was interested in leasing industrial space, asked about availability in that industrial park. The property manager was friendly, talkative. Unit 6 just opened up, actually. Previous tenant's lease ended last month. What kind of business were they? Industrial supply company? Quiet tenants, paid on time, only had the space for 6 months. Did they have much equipment, much activity? Not really. Came and went. I think they were more of a logistics operation. Paperwork, coordination, that kind of thing. Catherine thanked him, said she'd think about it. She hung up. Allied Industrial Supply had leased the space for 6 months, March through August, exactly the period they'd been billing Meridian. And now they were gone. The materials they'd supposedly delivered, steel components, industrial supplies, either came from somewhere else or didn't come at all. Catherine went to the warehouse after lunch. Found the receiving supervisor. Showed him the 9 receiving reports for Allied deliveries. Do you remember these shipments? He looked at the documents, frowned. When were these? March through August. This year. I'd have to check the logs. Why? Routine audit, just verifying documentation. He pulled the warehouse log, a thick binder, daily entries, every delivery recorded. He flipped through March, April, May. I don't see Allied here. Are you sure these came through our warehouse? The receiving reports are signed. He looked at the signatures again. This one's Miller. This one's supposed to be Rodriguez. This one's Davis. Do the signatures look right to you? He studied them, uncomfortable now. I don't know. Maybe, hard to say. Went back to her office. Sat at her desk for a long time. Then she pulled out the company directory, found Raymond Holder's extension, picked up the phone, put it back down. She wasn't ready yet. Not until she knew more. She needed one more piece, something definitive. That evening she called her sister, Margaret, an attorney in Columbus. They talked once a week. Friendly, supportive. Margaret knew Catherine's work, knew she was careful, knew when something was bothering her. Hypothetically, Catherine said, if someone at a company was approving fake invoices, what would they gain from it? Margaret was quiet a moment. Are we talking about your company? Hypothetically, approve fake payments, intercept the checks, cash them. But that's risky, easy to trace. What's the non-obvious answer? Creating a paper trail, making a fake vendor look legitimate, building a history of transactions that could be used to justify other things. Exports, transfers, anything that needs documentation. Catherine sat with that. Why hypothetically? Margaret asked. Just thinking through a scenario I saw in an audit. If you found something, you need to report it. I will. When I'm sure. She hung up. Margaret's words stayed with her, creating a paper trail. She thought about what Allied Industrial Supply had actually done. Billed Meridian 9 times, $166,050 total, for materials that may or may not have been delivered from a vendor that operated out of an empty office for 6 months and then disappeared. What if the money wasn't the point? What if the point was the documentation, the invoices, the purchase orders, the paper trail that made Allied look like a legitimate supplier of industrial materials? Materials that could, theoretically, be exported, sold to other companies, shipped overseas. Materials that could have dual-use applications. Catherine's hands went cold. She locked her office, drove home, lay awake most of the night. Wednesday morning, Catherine requested a meeting with her supervisor, Harold Preston, VP of Finance, 23 years with Meridian. Catherine respected him. He was methodical, fair, not prone to overreaction. They met in his office at 10. Catherine brought everything. The invoices, the photocopied vendor file, the payment history, her notes on the receiving reports, the warehouse log discrepancies, the empty industrial park unit. She walked him through it, systematically, without interpretation, just facts. Preston listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back in his chair. You've verified all of this? Yes. And you haven't spoken to Holder? Not yet. I wanted to bring it to you first. Preston looked at the documents for a long time. Then he looked at Catherine. I'm going to make a call. Don't discuss this with anyone else, including Holder. Understood? Yes. Good work, Catherine. Serious work. Went back to her desk. Tried to focus on other files. Couldn't? At 3:15 p.m., Preston called her back to his office. He wasn't alone. There was a man with him, late 40s, dark suit. Composed, he stood when Catherine entered. Catherine, this is Mr. Harrison. He's with corporate security. Harrison shook her hand. Firm grip, professional. Wells, Mr. Father. Preston briefed me on your findings. I'd like to go through everything again, in detail. Catherine repeated what she told Preston. Harrison took notes, asked specific questions. Times, dates, documentation gaps. When she finished, he closed his notebook. Have you told anyone outside the company about this? No. Just my supervisor. Good. I need you to continue exactly as you have been. If anyone asks about your audit, it's routine. You found some documentation discrepancies, nothing more. Is this serious? It warrants a formal investigation, which wasn't an answer, which was, in its own way, the clearest answer he could give. The next 2 weeks had a surreal quality to them. Catherine went to work, conducted her audits, ate lunch in the cafeteria, attended a finance department meeting about year-end procedures. Everything was normal on the surface, but she was watching now, paying attention in a way she hadn't before. She saw Raymond Holder twice, once in the hallway, once in the parking lot. He nodded at her both times. Friendly, casual. He had no idea she'd flagged his approvals. Or maybe he did, she couldn't tell. She noticed unfamiliar people in the building, not employees. Visitors, she assumed. But they moved through the facility with a kind of purposeful awareness that didn't feel like a normal site visit. Security, maybe. Investigators. She didn't know. Preston told her nothing. Just thanked her again for her diligence and asked her to keep working normally. Be honest, would you have been able to do that? Go to work every day knowing you'd found something, waiting for someone else to act on it, not knowing when or how or what the outcome would be? Catherine managed it. She'd spent her career in corporate environments. She understood hierarchies, understood that once you escalated something, it left your control. She just hadn't expected the waiting to feel like this. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after her meeting with Harrison, Preston called her to his office again. Harrison was there, and 2 other people, a man and a woman, both in dark suits. Preston made introductions. Catherine, this is Agent Brennan and Agent Foster. They're with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She kept her face neutral. Sat down. Agent Brennan spoke first. Mid-40s. Sharp eyes. Calm voice. Ms. Wells, your audit findings triggered an investigation that's uncovered something significant. We'd like to walk through your process. Everything you found, everything you noticed. Catherine did. For the 3rd time now. The purchase order sequence. The vendor file. The payment pattern. The empty office. The receiving report inconsistencies. Brennan listened. Took notes. When Catherine finished, she set her pen down. Did Raymond Holder know you were auditing procurement files? No, it's a random sampling. He wouldn't have been notified in advance. Has his behavior changed at all in the past 2 weeks? Not that I've noticed. Brennan exchanged a glance with Foster. Miss Wells, she said carefully, the company you identified, Allied Industrial Supply, was not a legitimate vendor. It was created specifically to establish a billing relationship with Meridian. The purpose was to build documentation that could support other activities. Catherine felt the room tilt slightly. What kind of activities? Export of controlled materials. We believe Meridian was being used as a procurement front for a foreign intelligence operation. The words hung in the air. Catherine heard them, absorbed them slowly. Soviet? She asked. Brennan didn't confirm, didn't deny. The investigation is active. We can't provide operational details. There will be arrests. Soon. Your findings provided the evidentiary foundation we needed to move forward. Tried to process. Raymond Holder, she said. Is he? Brennan looked at her steadily. We're not at liberty to discuss specific individuals under investigation, which was an answer. Catherine sat back. She thought about Holder. 15 years with the company. Friendly, competent, normal. She thought about how invisible it must have been. A few fake invoices, a paper trail. Approvals that no one questioned because Holder had the authority to give them. How long had it been happening? How much had been moved through Meridian without anyone noticing? Am I in danger? She asked. We don't believe so. You acted within your normal duties. There's no indication you were detected, but we'd like you to maintain your routine. Act normally. If Holder or anyone else approaches you about your audit, keep it vague. Documentation review. Routine compliance. For how long? Days, not weeks. They asked her to sign a non-disclosure agreement. She did. They thanked her. Said her cooperation was noted in the formal record. She left Preston's office, walked back to her desk on unsteady legs, sat down, stared at her computer screen without seeing it. She'd found a Soviet intelligence operation, an audit, someone who looked at expense reports and purchase orders and payment histories. She'd found it because a sequence of numbers didn't line up the way it should have. The arrests happened on a Tuesday morning. Catherine was at her desk when she heard the commotion. Voices in the corridor, movement. She stood, walked to her office door. Federal agents in the lobby. 4 of them. Raymond Holder being led out in handcuffs, his face pale. Composed but pale, he didn't look at anyone, just walked, flanked, out the main entrance. The office was silent, everyone watching, no one speaking. Catherine stepped back into her office, closed the door, sat down. Her hands were shaking. If you've stayed with this story to this point, if you've followed Catherine through the numbers and the documentation and the quiet unraveling, the final pieces are coming together now. Because what she found wasn't just about fake invoices or paper trails. It was about how intelligence operations hide inside ordinary institutions, inside the systems that people trust because they're routine, and how someone paying close attention can expose them. That afternoon, Catherine was called to a conference room on the executive floor. Preston was there, the company's CEO, corporate counsel, Agent Brennan. They briefed her, not fully. Just enough. Raymond Holder had been recruited 8 years prior. Not an ideological recruit. Financial motivation, gambling debts, pressure, compromise. He'd been tasked with creating procurement relationships that could be used to move materials and technology out of the country. Allied Industrial Supply was one of several such operations. The fake invoices established a legitimate paper trail, made later transactions look routine. The materials Meridian manufactured weren't classified, but they had dual-use applications, could be adapted, could be integrated into other systems. The intelligence value was in the documentation, the appearance of legitimacy. It had been running for 3 years. Catherine's audit had caught it, not through suspicion, not through dramatic investigation, through routine compliance work, through noticing that 3 purchase order numbers didn't fit the timeline they were supposed to. "Will this be public?" Catherine asked. The CEO answered, "There will be a statement. An employee was arrested on charges related to fraud and export violations. Details will remain limited. And my involvement? For your protection and for operational security." Catherine nodded. She understood. She went back to her office, finished the day, drove home. Her sister called that evening. Had seen the news. Brief mention on the local broadcast. Arrest at Meridian Industrial Technologies. Federal charges. "Was that related to your hypothetical question?" Margaret asked. "Yes." "Are you okay?" "I think so." "Did you do the right thing?" Catherine thought about that. About Raymond Holder. About the fake vendor. About the materials that might have been moved through forged documentation. About what could have been built with them. Where they could have ended up. "Yes," she said. "I did." Catherine Wells continued working at Meridian for another 9 years. She became Director of Internal Audit, then VP of Finance when Preston retired. She was good at her job. Meticulous. Fair. Known for catching things others missed. She never discussed what happened in 1983. Not with colleagues. Not with friends. Not even fully with her sister. It was classified. Would remain so for years. Maybe decades. But she carried it with her. The knowledge that routine work could intersect with invisible wars. That attention to detail could matter in ways that had nothing to do with quarterly reports and compliance metrics. The Cold War wasn't fought only in dramatic places, not only in embassies and military installations and the visible theaters of geopolitical tension. It was fought in audit files, in purchase order sequences, in vendor files that were too thin, in receiving reports where the signatures didn't quite match. Fought by people like Catherine Wells, who noticed when numbers didn't add up, who followed that discrepancy carefully, who trusted that something wrong in the data meant something wrong in the world. Her name never appeared in any public record. The file documenting her findings remains classified. The investigation she triggered was folded into larger operations that she would never be fully briefed on. But somewhere in a federal archive there is a case file that begins with 3 invoices from Allied Industrial Supply. Sequential purchase orders issued on non-sequential dates. Found by an auditor on a Thursday afternoon in September 1983. Because she was paying attention. Because she couldn't ignore something that didn't fit. Because she followed it until she understood what it was. And here we come to the end of another story. If this story touched you, if you found yourself in the silence between the details, leave a like and tell me in the comments where you're from. History isn't always written in headlines. Sometimes it's written in moments that no one notices. Sometimes I read these stories to my granddaughter before bed. She always asks me if they're real. I answer that they're possible. If you want to have these stories in your hands, I've gathered some of them in a book. It's there, in the link pinned in the comments if you want it. My nephew Daniel has been helping me with the recordings. He insists that I share these stories with the world. He says they can't just stay in my memory. I wrote this book the year I lost Margaret, my beloved wife. She always believed I should write. Perhaps this is just a small step to honor her. If you want to follow me through these stories, my name is Viktor Hale, and this is my contribution.